Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lisa Ireland. I'm the CEDARS Data Manager in the Student Information Office at OSPI. Welcome to the June 2023 CEDARS statewide meeting. We seem to have a good number of people rolling in at the last minute. We will wait about 30 more seconds and then we will launch our meeting. Do a little housekeeping and then get started. We have two guest speakers today that I am happy to introduce in just a moment. Okay, it looks like the number of folks entering the waiting room while entering our webinar has slowed down a little bit. Again, this is Lisa Ireland with the Student Information Office at OSPI. Welcome to the June 2023 CEDARS statewide meeting. We're going to talk about our vision, mission, and values statement here at OSPI. Our vision is all students prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. Our mission is to transform K-12 education to a system that is centered on closing opportunity gaps. It's characterized by high expectations for all students and educators, and we strive to achieve this by developing equity-based policies and supports that empower educators, families, and communities. And our values are ensuring equity, collaboration, and service, achieving excellence through continuous improvement, and focusing on the whole child. Each student, family, and community possesses strengths and cultural knowledge that benefits their peers, educators, and schools. By ensuring educational equity, it goes beyond equality. It requires education leaders to examine the ways current policy and practices result in disparate outcomes for students of color, students living in poverty, receiving special education and English language learner services, students who identify as LGBTQ+, and highly mobile student populations. This requires education leaders to develop an understanding of historical context, engage students, families, and community representatives as partners in decision-making, and actively dismantling systemic barriers, replacing them with policies and practices that ensure all students have access to the instruction and support they need to succeed in our schools. Right now, before we go into our session, I'd like to speak to our tribal land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial and who still inhabit the area today. I'm coming to you today from the Indigenous people of the Squally-Apsh or Nisqually tribe. If you'd like, you're not required to, but if you'd like to acknowledge the lands from which you are coming to us today, you can put that in the chat. Today, I'm going to fill in the role as the moderator, and I have one slide I'm going to cover for you. And then we are grateful to have Samantha Bowen, the Executive Director of Early Learning, who will be speaking to Transitional Kindergarten. And then Jenny Plaja, who's the Executive Director of Governmental Relations, will be talking to us about legislative updates. We are going to talk about the 2022-23 end-of-year applications that are currently open. That's going to be a quick overview. As I said, the Early Learning Transitional Kindergarten 2023-24 changes, 2023-24 legislative changes, and then we'll provide you with some resources and questions and wrap up. So one of the things before we get started is I want to do a little housekeeping. You should have gotten the meeting as being recorded notice, and we will be monitoring questions in the Q&A only. So please, even though the chat is not disabled, use the Q&A to provide any questions. We'll be reviewing and responding to that as we move through this session. So first, we're going to touch on the 2022-23 end-of-year applications that are currently open. The K-4 literacy end-of-year application is open. The deadline for reporting is July 31st, 2023. I've provided links to the user guides for each of these applications. They're a comprehensive walkthrough of the reporting expectations and guidelines. Next, we have the Learning Assistance Program, or LAP, end of year application. Deadline, September 30th, 2023. And as of today, the Open Doors Youth Reengagement, also known as the 1418 or Youth Reengagement end of year application. The deadline for that reporting is October 31st, 2023. As a reminder, all of these are accessed in our secure EDS or Education Data System portal logon. If you have questions on the roles you need or how to access them, again, that's provided in our user guides, and it will let you know how to request that role within your district. And just a quick cover today, there's been some CEDARS loading slowdowns this week, and that means it takes a little bit longer for these end of year applications to be refreshed or loaded overnight. If you go in this afternoon to the Open Doors Youth Reengagement application, for example, which opened today, if you don't see all of your student list data populated, by tomorrow you should be able to see all of this. And we appreciate your understanding and patience as we get CEDARS up to speed. I will look at the one question in the Q&A, and then we're going to move into the meat and potatoes of our presentation here today. So bear with me. So someone asked if it's possible to get the link in the chat to the presentation so it's easier to share out with others in the district. I don't know if the person who's assisting me today, Leilani Tyler, she was not mentioned, and thank you so much for assisting us today. If she can drop that in the chat or not, but we will speak to that later on. Right now, we're going to move on to our presentation for the early learning transitions, and I'm going to hand the reins over to Samantha. Thanks for being here today, Samantha.
Thank you, Lisa. As Lisa mentioned, my name is Samantha Bowen. I'm the Executive Director of Early Learning at OSPI, and I've been asked to join you today to talk about House Bill 1550 for the new Transition to Kindergarten program. Next slide, please. Thank you. So House Bill 1550 was passed this legislative session. The intent is to continue the program and rename Transitional Kindergarten to Transition to Kindergarten. So we are maintaining the TK acronym for ease of continuation of the program. So Transition to Kindergarten is the new name. The bill directs OSPI to administer the program and initiate rulemaking. So we are in the process of writing emergency rules for the implementation of TK for the 23-24 school year. And we will begin the permanent rulemaking process shortly after for the 24-25 school year. As part of the rulemaking, we will define who is eligible for TK. The bill defines an eligible child as a student who is determined to benefit from an additional year of preparation prior to kindergarten, and they are identified through a screening process determined by the local education agency. The student also must be at least 4 years old by August 31st of the school year they enroll in TK. There is also a requirement to prioritize families with the lowest income as possible, as much as possible. The bill continues. It does specify, as currently students have a state identifier, they will continue to have a student identifier, and we will create a separate course for the purpose of data and reporting requirements. And I'll speak to this a little bit further in our next slide. TK students will continue to be funded through apportionment, similar as they were this year. So their enrollment will be reported separate from kindergarten. So there will be a new class, TK class, on the P223. So you will report TK students separately from kindergarten, although for the purposes of funding and compliance, they are still considered kindergarten students. And all funds generated for TK must be used in the TK program. Thank you. For CEDARS, we wanted to highlight a few items. There are no changes to this upcoming school year, 23-24, no changes to CEDAR. So TK students will continue to be enrolled as kindergarten with the TK program code, just as they were this current year. We do have a proposal for next year to add a TK grade level in CEDARS, as well as additional validation for that age requirement. So we'd like to put rules in place to ensure that students who are enrolled in the TK grade level are eligible based on the rules for TK. So those are my highlights that I think apply to this group. I would be happy to address questions when the time is appropriate.
Thank you, Samantha. We have somebody that has raised their hand. I don't know that we have the ability for you to unmute yourself. Could you type your question in the Q&A? We'll just give them a moment to do that.
While we're waiting for that question to come in, I will highlight, I know there have been some additional questions around fiscal and reporting. At the end of the slide deck, I did include links to school apportionment, a presentation recently that walked us through how to report students for funding, as well as a link to an Excel document to calculate revenue from TK enrollment. So those will be available in the resources slide at the end of the presentation.
Yes, so we do have those resources linked at the end. I'm looking at the Q&A. It appears we have a question. The question is, so this year will show no changes in data entry into Skyward as well as CEDARS. So I can answer this question. Skyward is one of the 7 or 8 student information systems used in Washington State that then submits to CEDARS. So Christy, I'm assuming that is your SIS system. I can't speak to the changes in your SIS, how that will be managed, but the data will be submitted to CEDARS for the 23-24 school year in the same manner as it was for the 22-23 school year. But you'll need to reach out to your vendor support team to see if they're making any changes locally. Okay, and thank you. And what we can do is we can move on to the information about the legislative updates. And as if you have time to process your thoughts and formulate them, feel free to put them into the Q&A because we should have plenty of time today to answer questions and speak to, again, questions you may have for both Samantha or for Jenny. So for now, whoops, one more question. I would like to clarify that the TK program is separate from the ECAP program. Can you speak to that for us, Samantha?
Of course, and I will stay on for the duration of the presentation as questions come in. ECAP is separate. ECAP is a program for 3 to 5-year-olds that is state funded, and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families has oversight of ECAP. TK is a separate program from ECAP.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So as folks, again, have time to think about their questions and maybe formulate those, we will move on to the presentation from Jenny Plaja. And she's going to speak to the 23-24 legislative changes that are pending. And I will ask Jenny, if I'm not pronouncing your last name correctly, can you provide that for us? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. You're correct. It's Jenny Plaja. I'm the Executive Director of Government Relations here at OSPI. And thank you for inviting me here to speak to you today. So I'm going to talk through some of the pieces of legislation that passed this session that might impact student data collection, reporting, or even some just the day-to-day business. OSPI is in the process of implementation planning now, which involves thoroughly reviewing the bill language, reaching out to partners impacted and legislators and ledge staff, making sure we understand the language, and in the case that we don't, or there is a lack of clarity, gaining that clarity either through legal experts or just making sure that intent and everyone is in agreement with what the language says and means. Understanding available resources and mapping out that plan. So at this point in time, where I'm highlighting some of the key items where we think may impact CEDARS down the line. Some of them are still undecided and they could go a couple of different routes, or it may be kind of a phase in implementation of data collection. So I'm just trying to flag the ones that should be on your radar and admitting that there may be one on here that isn't captured. For context, the legislature introduced a total of 2,122 bills. Of those, OSPI tracked 342, meaning 342 of those had some kind of direct impact on the state agency of OSPI or school districts, the broader K-12. Of the bills that we tracked, 90 of them passed. And in addition, we received 48 new budget provisos providing funding or new work being tasked to the agency, some of which flow through to school districts. So there's a lot to sift through right now. And while this might not be an exhaustive list, it's, I think, enough for us all to focus on in the meantime. And I did include a resource in the resource documents that links to our bulletins. That's a great place for any new requirements coming down the line for OSPI. If you are not someone in the school district who gets those bulletins directly, you can always go to that link, bookmark it, and pay attention to the most recent ones. And then also a place where we put new rules that are coming around that may impact you and your districts. So jumping into it, House Bill 1550 is a key one, which has been covered in prior slides. Thank you, Sam. Another one I want to elevate is House Bill 1658, work for elective credit. This bill requires that beginning in this coming school year, so 23-24, students age 16 and older may earn elective high school credit through paid work experience. 1/2 elective credit is awarded for each 180 hours of paid and verified work, not to exceed a total of 2 credits per student. Just for some context, in October of last year, OSPI initiated rulemaking to guide implementation of work experience programs. Initially, our proposed rules focused on updating existing WACs around cooperative worksite learning, establishing new WACs so that implementation of this option was consistent. So now we're just reinitiating the rules process that we already opened, which makes it the timeline be able to work a little faster so that we can hopefully get things in place for this upcoming school year, so that we can address both the pre-existing changes we were planning and then the new legislation that passed. So that it will be available on our rules website that is linked below. The rules are, again, just trying to give consistent guidance to providing those opportunities and also addressing the funding rules to identify the proper calculations for funding these experiences within our educational system. The next bill I want to highlight is Senate Bill 5243 around high school and beyond plan. This bill tasks OSPI with facilitating the transition to a universal online platform to support high school and beyond planning down the road. So there's some implementation time. Some of the components required of the platform will require connections with student data, like course taking, for example, to be made available through the platform. So this one will take some time. Right now, OSPI is tasked to develop a preliminary list of vendors who can meet the criteria identified in the legislation to build that platform. Submitting that list and estimated costs to the governor and the legislature, and with ultimately selecting the vendor by June 1st of next year. And then we have to develop a full implementation plan for statewide implementation by the following October, once we've identified who the vendor is. So there's some pieces that need to happen rather quickly. And throughout that, our team is going to be working closely with other statewide partners, with school districts, with counselors, with those who are currently working with the high school and beyond plans and the platforms that districts are using to figure out what does that connection look like? Are there new elements that need to be collected? If so, how and where? Or is it just a matter of getting systems to talk to each other effectively, efficiently? So keep an eye out for implementation of that bill. Senate Bill 5072, highly capable students. This bill clarifies expectations and funding, including like nomination, the screening practices related to students who are maybe highly capable. It does require new data reporting and maybe collection, but new reporting related to these students. Annually, OSPI must make data publicly available, and it lists a lot of criteria that we have to do, including comparing race, ethnicity, low income, status of highly capable students compared to the same demographic in the general student population. The bill also tests districts to, just a second, I made a note of it. Maybe I didn't. There is some direction. I'll circle back to that one. I was not going off of my notes. I skipped something. So that's when we're writing rules to support implementation. So keep an eye out on those rules to see how they'll impact implementation. House Bill 1308, high school graduation pathways. This bill creates a new performance-based learning experience pathway where the student can demonstrate knowledge, skills in a real-world context, providing that they're meeting or exceeding state learning standards in ELA and math. OSPI is responsible for collecting and reporting data on grad pathways. So whatever the changes are through there will require updates to our grad pathway data. OSPI is working closely with State Board on this because the data collection will need to align with the new rules that are established as part of implementation of that new pathway option. The bill also states that annually districts must examine data on student groups participating and completing each grad pathway option and disaggregate the minimum number of student groups, including all the race and ethnicity subgroups, gender, students who are the subject of a dependency proceeding, and students experiencing homelessness, and multilingual or English learners. So that's when we'll have some data impacts. Sorry, I got distracted by the question. Next, House Bill 1316, Running Start. So this bill allows for students participating in Running Start programs to be funded up to a combined maximum enrollment of 1.4 FTE. This bill builds off of some of the summer Running Start pilots that have been happening through budget proviso over the last couple of years. So OSPI will be updating rules to clarify enrollment and funding eligibility for Running Start students, and including the summer Running Start option. Senate Bill 5048, college and the high school. This bill removes fees for college and high school, fees from students and families, and the funding now flows. It used to flow through OSPI to school districts. Now the funding flows directly to the institutions of higher education. So there's some implementation partnership that needs to happen here between K-12 and higher ed to see how it's a new funding system. So we're ironing out the kinks, figuring out how that's going to work. Right now, we don't have details at this time for what might need to change. It'll probably be changes in on the fiscal side of things. I don't know that anything would need to change in CEDARS, but those are conversations that are taking place now, and we will make sure to keep you all apprised. Senate Bill 5617, CTE Courses, requires that all agreements between school districts and a skill center must include that any approved state or local equivalency course offered is honored as an equivalency course by all school districts that participate in the skill center. And then all the public schools that offer it or offer courses in 9 to 12 must provide all students and their guardians with info about the opportunities for meeting credit-based graduation requirements through CTE equivalency courses. So again, I'm not exactly sure what data elements will need to change here, but there may be some updates in how students are transcripted. Finally, Senate Bill 5593, student data transfer. This bill states that beginning in 2024, each school district that operates a high school has to annually transmit directory information of all enrolled high school students to OSPI by November 1st. OSPI then holds this information and makes it available to the state's public institutions of higher ed through data sharing agreements. Yeah, so that's it. The only other thing I would add, just as a legislative update, is that OSPI is continuously and intentionally reviewing our practices, protocols, ensuring that we are being responsive to the legislature so that they have the data and the information they need to pass good policy that supports districts, and to make sure that school districts have what they need, and that we are working in partnership with you to create strong systems that actually support data-driven decision-making. And so being in government relations, and I'm probably seeing a lot of you on this call who I have not had the pleasure of meeting in person yet, but I just welcome conversations and dialogue around how we can strengthen those partnerships, whether it be from messaging around student data and data-driven decision-making, to even just understanding more deeply how the varying data collection systems operate. And I act as a go-between along with many of you who are, I'm sure, working in partnership with your local legislators to help inform and make sure that legislators have that information too. So you'll have my contact information through this presentation, and I just welcome conversations or any follow-up questions on any of these bills or any other legislative work happening that impacts K-12.
Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate that. And Samantha's initial conversation. We'll move on to the resources. I believe Samantha will be answering the question that was asked under the resources tab, where we have embedded some information. But I do want to point out for those of, there's some different terminology we use under the student data transfer. When we speak to beginning in 2024, we're not speaking to the 23-24 school year. That would be fall of 2024, just in case folks have their ear to the ground on this measure. So then moving on to our resources page. So all of these links will work. We have a couple pages for the resources, so bear with me just a moment. So, and I want to point out, if you have missed, because we're using the Q&A to answer questions, this PowerPoint will be emailed to the field after the presentation is over today, instead of trying to drop it into various areas in the chat, especially when we let you know we're only utilizing the Q&A. So thank you for your patience on that. It will be mailed out to all of you. We are recording this webinar, and once it's transcribed in 88, it will be posted in a few weeks. We will announce where it's located. It'll be on the OSPI YouTube channel, probably in the July assignment. So real quick, the resources here, the CEDARS documents, since the majority of our audience here today is the CEDARS district administrators, you know where to find that information. But when you get the PowerPoint, there's a link here that will take you to the manual appendices, reporting guidance, and validation documents. The EDS application user guides, as I referenced on our first subject today, we're talking about current open applications. The EDS application user guides page will hold those documentations for supporting end-of-year reporting, non-standard submissions, and other supporting documents. Now, I believe that Samantha wants to speak to the school apportionment links.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. So for the webinar today, we will not be specifically addressing enrollment on the P223. However, our fiscal team did host a webinar in May, and there are 5 or 6 slides linked here under training and presentations where they walk through the P223 and enrollment reporting for TK. Any questions you have around that can go directly to our school apportionment team, and they will support your district in answering those questions. So I just want to make sure that I acknowledge that question that was in there. And I believe the remaining questions are possibly for Jenny.
Hi, I answered the first on 5593, which included the definition of directory information. So that's typed in the answered, you can find that in the answered one. And for 5593, required, no, an opt-out, it would still be available for students and families if they wanted to. So that's part of the process our teams here will work on, is figuring out how to ensure that those still apply. But no, if the student does not want their information shared, it won't be. not sure who's presenting the slide, but I'll just speak to the new requirements and rule changes. Those are the two links that I referenced, where if you do not receive updates automatically, that's where you can go to see all OSPI bulletins at that first link. And the second one is all of our rulemaking activity, where it tells you ones like CR 101, which is just a heads up that we will be opening a specific WAC. And then 102 is when we schedule a public hearing and provide for the language. If rules, rules that are a result of legislative action often require emergency rules, like the initial ones for transitional kindergarten will have initial emergency rules that go through a more expedited process so that we can get rules in place and on the books in time for the 23-24 school year with permanent rules following. So all of that information can be found on that website.
Thank you. Someone just let me know I was muted. We are approaching the end of our webinar. Thank you for that additional information, Jenny. I always say my best things when I'm muted. So we have one more question, and Jenny is answering that one. The question to the field is: FERPA allows districts local control to define who's included in directory information. Our district doesn't include addresses, emails, or phone numbers in directory info. How does this work in contrast to what OSPI considers directory information?
I wasn't going to answer the question because I was going to say that's a great question. The definition that I put in there is actually from the bill itself. The bill itself defines directory information. So that's a great question. Either Lisa, if you could take that, or maybe you know the answer, and we'll make sure that our team has that on their radar. They probably already do for implementation to give guidance on that. But that, I just wanted to clarify, that definition isn't ours. That was in the actual legislation of 5593.
Correct. And so we will be sharing these requirements, the opt-out abilities or capabilities to district, and we will be communicating with all involved entities as we move forward with that. We are in the planning phases right now, so expect to hear different information, or the appropriate people in your district will get this information in the near future. Leilani has dropped our contact information into the chat. I appreciate that, for Lisa Ireland, Student Information Office, Jenny Plaja with Government Relations, and Samantha Bowen, Early Learning. And Leilani also dropped in the link to the OSPI YouTube page where we post previously recorded CEDARS webinars. That's also in the Simon newsletter that is sent out. We will wait just one more minute to see if we have any questions. We currently don't have any. This has been a shorter webinar today, but providing wonderful information, especially as you all transition to the summer months. Hope you're winding down a successful school year. And here's the CEDARS reporting guidance and technical assistance. And again, the links to reach Samantha or Jenny directly were dropped into the chat. I will stay on for about another 30 seconds, but I think we can call this webinar completed. Thank you all for your time today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to be with us and to listen to this important information. And we have one more. Thank you all. We appreciate you and have a wonderful day. And if you get time off this summer, I hope you just enjoy it. Take care of yourselves. Have a great day.